Hi everybody and welcome to Il Covo di Weevil. My name is Stefano and I'm an Italian content creator. This is my first video in English, but I plan on doing some more in the future. Let me know if you enjoy it, especially if you're not Italian. Before we begin, if you enjoy my content, I'd like to ask you to support my channel by subscribing, hitting the like button and leaving a comment down below. So Mewtwo Mew GX has been one of the strongest cards in last year's standard format. It's still strong and relevant today, and new versions come out every other month. I talked about the Frostmoth and Blastoise GX version 1 month ago on my channel, and this time I'm here to introduce you to a new Welder Mewtwo version. This is not just a new version of Mewtwo, this is a Welder Mewtwo variant. You can pick any kind of energy color you like or any kind of GX Pokemon you like and build a Mewtwo deck around it. I've always found that Tapu Koko Prism Star has some hidden potential, so that's why I decided to try and combine the Welder Energy Acceleration with the Tapu Koko Energy Acceleration into one same deck. I guess I talked too much, so let's just check out the list. This is a Jirachi Mewtwo list. I don't like Pokegears. I don't like drawing a Pokegear on my first turn and then missing a Welder because I almost have 50 cards in my deck. I rather miss my Welder with a Jirachi, but having the possibility to pick a Cherish Ball or a Quick Ball and do something in my turn. The deck plays 3 Mewtwo and Mew GX because that's your main attacker. Thanks to the ability Perfection, you can copy any kind of attack from your Pokemon GX, both the ones you have on your bench and the ones you have in your discard pile, which means you can discard Stage 1 and Stage 2 Pokemon and use them as if they were basic Pokemon. This is why I love Mewtwo. It's such a versatile card. You probably know these first 3 attackers. Incineroar GX lets you deal 130 damage regardless of the color of the energy you have attached, and you can even discard a special energy from your opponent. Its GX attack is even better. If your Mewtwo ever gets attacked and not knocked out, you can hit a ridiculous amount of damage with that GX attack. We are playing big charms to ensure that it's not so easy to knock out our Mewtwo in one hit. Charizard GX probably doesn't even need an explanation. We are not interested in its first attack, we are only interested in its GX attack. We can deal 300 damage on our second turn only at a cost of 1 Welder. 4 energies to deal 300 damage. Raichu is probably the attacker you're going to use most times in your games, because you can use Flare Strike that allows you to deal 230 damage for 4 energies and you don't have to discard any of them. In certain scenarios you can also use Outrage. Outrage is a very efficient attack because it only costs 2 energies. Raichu also has a great GX attack because it lets you deal 200 damage for only 3 energies. Sometimes you can donk your opponent. It happened to me so many times. Sometimes you want to use its GX attack at its full potential. So 6 energies to deal 300 damage and bypass any effect on your opponent. Now let's get to the interesting part. Jolteon GX, Raichu and Alolan Raichu GX and Vikavolt V. These are the new stars of this Mewtwo deck variant. Jolteon GX has 3 great attacks. Its first attack lets you put any VMAX Pokemon in 1-hit knockout range of a Flare Blitz GX. Say you're not expecting your Mewtwo to be knocked out. After you use this attack, you can deal 300 damage to an Eternatus, and you only need 1 Zigzagoon to knock it out in 1 hit. The second attack is a good way to deal some damage with only 2 energies. We don't have Turbo Strike Solgaleo anymore, so that's a good possibility. We can knock out a Jirachi, and we can even deal some damage to bigger threats that we not expect to knock us out back in the following turn, of course. But it's the GX attack which is particularly interesting, because if you deal 110 damage and you protect yourself from any damage from the following turn, you're only 1 Flare Strike away from knocking out any VMAX Pokemon. Oh, and I will go into more detail when I talk about matchups. Raichu and Alolan Raichu GX is an amazing attacker. If you use Tandem Shock, you can deal 160 damage, which is already good, because at the moment the only way you have to deal some damage with 3 energies is just by using Incineroar GX first attack, which only deals 130 damage. It doesn't even knock out a DNA. Of course, that's not the reason why I'm playing Raichu and Alolan Raichu GX. Raichu and Alolan Raichu GX are the way that you can knock out 2 different VMAXs in one game without losing first. It is not difficult to knock out a VMAX Pokemon if you are a Mewtwo deck. The problem is knocking out a second VMAX Pokemon, But if your first Mewtwo was knocked out, and maybe even a Jirachi early game, and then you stamp your opponent to 2 cards, and you paralyze their active Pokemon, they might miss the switch, just like Pikarom has been doing for more than 1 year. I'm thinking about Eternatus. Eternatus doesn't play Jirachi, doesn't play the DAA, and probably doesn't even play 4 switches. It might not even play any single switch. Vikavolt V, well, it's not easy to talk about it without mentioning any specific matchup. You know that Mewtwo has always been a terrible matchup against one of the most played and most successful decks. And I'm not gonna mention which one, because I'm gonna talk about it in a few minutes. To the DAA GX, 1 Crobat V and 1 Eldegoss V. This is our consistency team that, together with Jirachi, lets us play every single game. It's really hard to break when you're playing a Welder Mewtwo deck, especially when it is based on Jirachi. Galarian Zigzagoon is very situational, but as we're playing also Scoop Up Nets, it's an option I like to have. And Tapu Koko Prism Star. Tapu Koko Prism Star gives the deck so many options. Now I invite you to look at all the attackers we have in this deck and imagine the impact that Tapu Koko Prism Star can have on them. You could use Flare Strike or Flare Blitz GX on your first turn. I mean, it takes a perfect first turn to achieve that, but it is possible. Mewtwo discards a lot of cards at the beginning of the game. You can use Jirachi, you use Welder, you use the DAA, and maybe even Crobat. There are so many cards that you can see in one single turn. If ADP can pull off a GX turn 1, why could Mewtwo not do something so similar? That's not the goal of the deck. I mean, if it happens, it's probably GG for your opponent. But if it doesn't happen, that's not the main reason I'm playing it. Tapu Koko lets you attack and charge your Mewtwo even when you don't hit a 2 energy welder, or even if you don't hit your welder at all. You can attack with Jolteon even without using welder on your first turn. The same goes for Vikavolt. You can even use the DAA GX attack. It might come in handy sometimes. And Tapu Koko lets you charge a Raichu and Alolan Raichu GX in one single turn. The rest of the deck is really straightforward. We're playing 4 Welders, 2 Boss's Orders, 4 Quick Balls, 4 Cherish Ball, 4 Switches and 3 Scoop Up Nets to ensure that our Jirachi engine works perfectly. 2 Reset Stamps because they are so useful in many situations. I've won so many games thanks to a Reset Stamp in Mewtwo. 2 Big Charms because you don't want to be knocked out in one hit by Eternatus. It can still pull it off, but you play Big Charms to make it a little more difficult for them. Big Charm can be useful even against ADP or even against Blacephalon if you want to snipe your bench with Cramorant. 3 Giant Heart, 8 Fire Energies and 5 Lightning Energies. If we consider that in this version Tapu Koko retrieves 2 energies back from the discard pile, we should be fine. So this was a detailed description of the list and its functioning. Now I'll tell you how I play every single matchup with this list. The deck's still work in progress, so if you notice something that I might have neglected, please tell me down in the comments. I like to see this list more as a starting point than as an ultimate Thunder Mewtwo list. The ADP matchup has been extremely positive for Mewtwo ever since ADP was released. We are trying to hit 300 damage right after they use Alter Creation GX. Usually we lose this matchup only when we break. Mewtwo's matchup against Eternatus has usually been regarded as negative. With this version, you have more options. You can start your game by using Jolteon GX attack and then finish the first Eternatus with Flare Strike or another attack. If they hit you and they don't knock you out in one hit, then you can use Incineroar GX attack, which makes things a lot easier. You can also use Jolteon GX attack to snipe some damage on that Eternatus and then knock it out with a Flare Blitz GX. This puts your opponent on the clock, because if they can't find a way to knock you out in one turn, they must choose between attacking you and then being knocked out with Incineroar GX attack, or risking that you can knock them out with Flare Blitz. We can deal with the second Eternatus by stamping our opponent to 1, 2 or 3 cards and using Tandem Shock. And if our opponent doesn't play switches or doesn't draw any switches, well, we can just attack their Eternatus and win on the following turn. The Centiskorch matchup is probably the only one that, in my opinion, gets a little worse with this version of Mewtwo. However, we can still use a couple of Zigzagoon to knock it out, and we can even access Incineroar GX attack, because Centiskorch won't always have 7 energies on its second turn. And if we attached a big charm, we would resist a 280 damage attack. Blacephalon is the matchup that most changes thanks to this version of the deck, because we finally have not one, but two options to improve this matchup. We want to use Jolteon GX attack with a Zigzagoon to knock out one Blacephalon. And then we are sure that we can use our Mewtwo twice, because you know how it goes. After you knock out one Blacephalon, they usually knock you out. So you drew one prize card and they draw 3. This time, we can draw one prize card and then Boss's Order and Oricorio or any other 2 prize Pokemon and knock it out. And then they can knock out our Mewtwo. But we drew 3 prize cards. They also probably wasted a lot of energies, because they had to discard 6 energies to knock out our first Mewtwo, and maybe they even discarded some more. We stamp our opponent to 3 cards and we attack with Vikavolt V. Our opponent does not have access to the 6 energies in their discard pile. 3 energies are attached to a Blacephalon. It means that 9 energies are not available. So how can they find 5 energies in one turn, especially if you stamp them to 3 cards? I don't think they can. On the following turn, you can just Zigzagoon, Scoop Up Net, knock out that Blacephalon, and now the energies in the discard pile are 9, and you only have to draw 2 prize cards. So you can just Boss's Orders, a 2 prize Pokemon, and attack with Vikavolt V's second attack. Vikavolt V is especially good against control as well. So there's another matchup that has suddenly become even more positive than it was before. It's Inteleon VMAX, because we can attack even with Raichu and Alolan Raichu GX. We can charge it with Tapu Koko or even without, and we just have to attack with it twice. I'd suggest starting with a Mewtwo anyway, because Charizard and Incineroar's GX attacks are very strong against the deck. But Raichu provides an amazing late game attacker, and in case Inteleon plays Mimikyu, we have one more reason to attack with Raichu. So that's another matchup that gets much easier thanks to the Lightning package. Well, Raichu is a star against Lapras as well. So Lapras is not the easiest matchup for Mewtwo. Thanks to Raichu, it gets much easier. What about the mirror? The inclusion of the Lightning package doesn't change too much the matchup. Tapu Koko can improve your energy attachments if your Mewtwo gets knocked out too early in the game, but aside from that, it's always the same Mewtwo mirror matchup. Decigoon, well, Decigoon is not an easy matchup. I suggest using Vikavolt V to slow down our opponent as much as possible, and then Boss's Order their Dartrix as soon as they find a Dartrix and knock it out. It also depends on how many Rowlets they can find at the beginning of the game. So the matchup isn't easy, but I would rather improve my matchup against Blacephalon. You can have it all. You have to choose whether you want a better matchup against a deck or another. The matchup against Pikarom doesn't change at all. We have Flare Blitz GX, which is amazing against the deck. We play 4 switches to protect ourselves from Tandem Shock. We just have to try and knock out 2 tag team Pokemon in one game. Charizard and Reshizard are more than enough to deal with the matchup. The last matchup I'm going to cover is Melcario. We can just take as much advantage as possible over Outrage, and we should even charge our Reshizard and attack with it. They play Weakness Guard Energy, they might not draw them soon enough, and we can also discard them with Incineroar GX attack. It's not so easy for us to knock out all those tanky Pokemon, but we should be fine. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. This was the first video in English that I made, so I hope you understood me. And if you're a native speaker, I apologize for the mistakes I've made. And please let me know in the comment if you enjoyed it. I wish you a nice day, and I'll see you next week with a new video.